Good morning to the UK column viewers and listeners, and welcome. I'm delighted to have Karl Schwarz back with me. We've already done two sessions on the World Trade Center collapse, part one and part two. That was a couple of months ago now. We're delighted to get back together, and today we decided we would have a very relaxed chat about how things have gone since we put out those two discussions about what took place for 9/11. So, Karl, thank you very much for joining me again.
Well, it's my pleasure. I know you've been very busy since part two, and so have I.
Well, this is a part of the key thing for us to discuss. It has been a very busy period, but we've made it. That's the important thing. We're back here together. So I wanted to start off with just asking you in simple terms. We did those two interviews. You brought to the table, I think at least, some really fascinating information, which is not information which has been widely, which is not information which has been available really in previous 9/11 analysis. And the key part was that you were talking about the lead up to it, the events leading up to the actual fall of the Twin Towers, and you were really getting into what was happening in a political sense, which gave the reason that this horrific event took place. So we put out the information. What sort of reaction have you got, and who has reacted to the two interviews that we did?
Well, it's been basically from Tokyo all the way to Vancouver. I mean, I've gotten a lot of contacts since we put my email in there. I feel like on some days I feel like I'm playing ping pong with my keyboard, but I'm answering and providing additional information to these people. We've set up a website. You know, that PowerPoint I sent you was almost 20 megabits, and of course, it's very professionally done. And what I've run into was now the 9/11 groups, the ones that are still standing, like Architect Engineers 9/11 Truth, the International Center for 9/11 Justice, the 9/11 pilot whistleblowers. You know, we're all in direct communications. You know, they have their own focus, and some of them are trying to get their head around my focus. And I think I said this in the second part two, was when I saw molten metal coming out of one of the Trade Center towers, I knew exactly what they had done. There's only one way to do that, and it's not by jet fuel, and it's not by building fire. Now, one of the things I've noticed is very interesting. I've since watched 7 videos, podcast videos, stuff like that. Kurt Weldon has come forward. The link I sent you this morning, he's on there also with Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who is DIA, a Defense Intelligence Agency. He's part of Able Danger. Also, Major Kurt Kleinsmith, he is DIA. He's the one that he was ordered to delete that 4 terabytes of information. So all the little pieces are starting to come in. That, the Saudis didn't have anything to do with this. They sure didn't have a chance to get in there and wire all 3 buildings for controlled demolition. I think Richard Gage has done a very good job of presenting that. But like I told you, and I've told Richard privately over email, when I saw that molten metal coming out, I went looking for who did the thermitic reaction that crippled that building to where the bombs would work and bring them down. And that's the trail. And it's like we said on I think the first part one, we have this situation where I met Bridas Corporation. They told me what their accomplishments were in Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan for a pipeline. And they also told me about the big Texas lawsuit. So 2 years before 9/11, a little bit over 2 years, I was already following that and waiting to see what else popped up. Because, like you said, geopolitical, that's trillions of dollars worth of oil and trillions of dollars of natural gas. And the only reason to attack Afghanistan is to take that over.
Okay, Karl, let's just come back a little bit on the types of people out there who have reacted, to what we've covered. Um, why don't we start off with the 9/11 groups themselves, because this is a very important selection of people. Many of them have worked extremely hard over a great number of years in order to try and get the truth out about what's taken place. And you will know these groups and the individuals far better than I do. But if I just list off some, we've got the International Centre for 9/11 Justice. I think that was funded by James Gurley way back in 2008. We've got 9/11 truth.org. We've got Scholars for 9/11 Truth. We've also got Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. We've got Richard Gage, who's now acting on his own, but he's still very much part of the wider 9/11 Truth community. We've got the pilot whistleblowers, and you briefly mentioned Abel Danger there, which is Field McConnell, if I remember correctly. So this is a very wide selection of people, and you've got amazing qualifications. You've got architects, you've got engineers, you've got stress specialized stress engineers, you've got legal people, all working in these groups. So has the information that you've brought forward in the last two interviews, has that made an impact on some of those established organizations? Have you had a positive response?
They're trying to get their head around it. It's like I told you in one of the interviews, I didn't focus on just the day of September 11th. And it's because of the molten metal falling out of that building. We went off in a different direction. One thing I can say, the early 9/11 truth groups, the nutcases, the tinfoil hat people, and the government shills are gone. They're not out here harassing everybody like they were. The followers that saw that on your on UK column, they've all been very knowledgeable. They've been very helpful. They provided some additional information that I think none of us had come across yet. So the little pieces are all coming together. And you have the International Center, they have one way they want to go at it. Kurt Weldon's group, he wants a presidential commission. And to me, that's like letting the government, that's like letting the wolves try to investigate themselves why so many sheep are gone. And we still think, now there has been a lawsuit, interesting enough. William Rodriguez, who was the janitor that just barely made it out of North Tower alive, got buried in the rubble. He filed a lawsuit against Bush for murder. And it was a Pennsylvania attorney. But when I read the case, and they didn't take the right attack. I mean, it was a RICO case with civil remedy, but that's not the sole way to go at this.
This is one of the things, isn't it, that when these events take place and people are caught up in it and they're hurt and damaged, or it's the relatives of people that have been killed, they understandably always approach things from their own point of view, and they've got a lot of passion, so they set off down a road determined to get justice. But this is not easy, and they particularly because they haven't got the strength of a team around them. So these are good people. You correct me if my analysis is wrong here, Karl, but it seems to me we have good people lots of passion and motivation, but they set off on their own path, and that actually makes them easy pickings for the other side, because essentially they are one or two individuals with very, very little experience of the system.
That's true. Give you a good example of what you just said. One of the videos I watched, actually two videos, this William Rodriguez, last man out of World Trade Center 1, he came very close to dying. He's battling PTSD. He lost 200 friends. He got there 30 minutes late. And every day, about 200 of them had breakfast up at the Windows of the World restaurant on the top floor. And he didn't make it in time, but he lost all those people. You know, that really weighs on him. So it also affects his direction on how to go at it. But even this morning, when I watched this Patrick Bet David with Kurt Gowdy, with Abel Danger's Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, and also Major Kirk Kleinsmith. Kleinsmith was talking about PTSD, you know, feeling like he failed America because they didn't see this. But what no one has done yet, and I keep listening, they're not admitting the asbestos problem. They're not admitting the other two lawsuits that the Port Authority lost. I mean, those lawsuits in the chronology I sent you, they're 1987, 1991, and 1995. And on May 17th in 2001, it was over. Basically, the World Trade Center was condemned. They had no solution to deal with the asbestos and possibly any other problem.
Right. So, Karl, do you think these key things, asbestos being one of them, but also you've given the political lead up, do you think these are points which are now going to be considered in the work and the research of these established groups?
I think they're trying to get their head around it, but you know, they've been focused whenever they started. My focus even predated September 11th. I mean, one other thing just popped up here, just to give you an idea of how the fillers are starting to come together, okay? In June, early June 2001, Donald Rumsfeld did something in the Pentagon that was unheard of. Rules of engagement when they scramble fighter jets, whether it's a foreign enemy, you know, trying to penetrate U.S. airspace, or it's a hijacked jet, just like, you know, they alleged happened on 9/11. He took away the fast response. They have two responses. One of them's a slow response to just get up behind them where they can't see you and trail them, see what their intentions are. But the other one is a direct engagement, like you're going up against a fighter jet. And if it's hijacked and it's confirmed, shoot it down if they're getting ready to hit something. He deleted that the first week in June 2001, and he didn't reinstate it until September the 12th, 2001, the day after. That's crucial because that overrode NORAD's ability and U.S. Air Force's ability to respond fast. And then it's also come out they had 3 separate hijacking scenarios that were playing out across the U.S. that day. And up in the Northeast, they had 22 fake blips. And the pilots, you know, the radar systems where the airports were, they couldn't tell what was what. And then it also came out that most of the U.S. fighter jets were in Canada and Alaska on another war game. You know, like the Russians are invading. You know, here they come over the pole. Then we had 8 fighter jets on the East Coast, and they're under Pentagon orders. You only have the slow route as an option.
Yeah, this brings us back onto the subject of premeditation, that something was going to take place. We could say that each of these things on their own are just one piece of evidence, but when you put it all together, These are significant pieces of evidence with the fact that something was being planned and actions were being taken, excuse me, in order to bring that plan into existence.
Well, it's like you pointed out in part one, mens rea, guilty mind. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Karl, if we just stick on the, because I'm fascinated by this. I know that you're not going to be able to reveal all your contacts, but you've consistently said to me that you've had a response to what's been put out. So alongside the official organisations, you've been sharing your information with a lot of people overseas, and you've been particularly keen to share your findings with people, authorities in other countries who subsequently been very badly affected by the fallout, no pun intended, from 9/11, in as much as that led into a particularly brutal period of wars in the Middle East in which a lot of people died and were injured. So you've spread your information into other countries. Are you getting are you getting a worthwhile are you getting a worthwhile response from those contacts in other countries where you share the information?
It is just starting to have context. When you contact a nation in something like this, 372 non-U.S. citizens lost their lives at World Trade Center. Second to the U.S. was the U.K., 67 dead. And then it goes all the way down the list to where there's about 10 or 12 nations that just lost one person. But trying to find whether or not you go through the Justice Department at that country or whether or not you go through the Foreign Affairs has been tedious. Every nation has their own way of doing things. Like the Japanese ministry, they lost 24 people that day, one person on Flight 93, and 23 bankers that they lost them in the upper floors of World Trade Center 1. That was Mitsui Bank, which is now Sumitomo Mitsui. The other one was Nishi Nippon Bank of Japan. And then in the South Tower, the Mizuno Finance, back then they were called Fuji Bank. But they lost 23 bankers just on those first two impacts. And I can't even find an email address to how to contact them. So I have people in Tokyo working on that. Hook me up with a name and I'll get in touch with them myself.
Right. But are there signs that at least some individuals within the government, the establishment of Japan, for instance, are still interested in what happened in 9/11 and, the deaths of some of their citizens?
Absolutely. The ones that have responded back, they're very concerned about that. They were told these were hijacked jets. And we can now prove there were no hijacked jets. We can also prove, thanks to Richard Gage, his group has finally done some excellent work on proving that all three towers were a controlled demolition. I never thought much about WTC 7 until Jimmy Walter's event, third anniversary of 2004. That one was a controlled demolition. But I knew the other towers were because of that molten metal.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the structure because in architecture school, in engineering school, I had to study the structure of the World Trade Center. Now, another two things that have come up, this is just this morning, this interview I was watching with those three people with Patrick, Bet David. The Donald Trump in 2000 predicted such an attack on the World Trade Center. Why, I have no idea. And then on the day of 9/11, he pointed out directly that World Trade Center 7 was an obvious controlled demolition. But the information that we knew already about the thermitic reaction to cripple the building, I mean, some of those columns, the flanges, and even the web, kind of an H shape, were 3 and 4 inch thick steel, and sometimes they had steel welded between the top and bottom flange to make it even stronger. And they even made some very special type of box columns. Just made them from scratch. They were using like 4 and 5 inch thick steel. And the only way to cut through that's not a bomb. You have to weaken it first, then the bomb can work.
Yeah. So what inference do you draw from the fact that Trump spoke about this at that time?
Well, I just heard it this morning and I'm still thinking about it. I found it a little odd. And I also found it, I think he knew about the asbestos lawsuit. I think that's why I did the interrogatories and I've got them posted on a website. I don't view him as a potential defendant. I think if we do the interrogatories and we do one deposition, this case is going to be pretty much open and shut. One of the things they were talking about this morning, the two people from DIA, was how they were the first to do metadata. They figured out at the Defense Intelligence Agency how to gather all this and analyze it and come down to a memo. Here's the problem. But the only problem with metadata is you can get out there on the internet and plant all kinds of little breadcrumbs. And when somebody else sweeps through there, this is what they find. And I've been convinced from day one, CIA was behind this all the way. I don't think the Saudis had anything to do with it. In fact, on our defendant list, there's a lot of American names. There's one Kuwaiti name. There are no Saudis.
You and your team have put all this data and the evidence together in order to bring a court case.
Yep, that's the only way I see to solve this. You just force it to action. You got the authority of the court. I don't think any type of presidential commission or government investigation is going to go anywhere. That's like letting the Kremlin investigate himself.
A lot of people were probably still are excited at the idea that the new Trump administration will lift the lid on a number of cases, really, where people have got concerns about whether at the time the real information came to the surface, all that information was denied to the US public. So Trump has absolutely got his feet under the table now. You have been trying to put this evidence through to, I will say, his legal team. Have you been getting any signs from that Trump team that they are interested in digging deeper into what happened with 9/11?
White House, no. I've contacted Pam Bondi at least 4 or 5 times. They have not had a response. I had an initial response from this Representative Anna Paulina Luna that Trump appointed to head up this disclosure program. And she responded back the first time, and I haven't heard from her since. I think they're just waiting to see which way the wind's going to blow here, which most politicians always do.
Right. So normally silence is okay. We can say silence is that they are watching and waiting. But wouldn't you have thought that if, let's be provocative here, if Trump was doing the right thing and standing up for America, wouldn't you think he'd want to really grip this because it's such a major event? And ultimately the fallout with the Patriot Act had such a huge effect on the American public. Wouldn't you expect him to grip this straight away?
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many other avenues that they're doing. They have created a nightmare legislatively. The Patriot Act is a serious blow to civil liberties, freedom and liberty. Basically trying to shut everybody up. Don't think, don't speak out, just listen to what we tell you. But they have other bills they brought in called the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. And now it's come out later. They have all these Pentagon funded bioweapon labs all over the world now, and they're hidden on the Pentagon budget. These are not separate authorizations that they're doing.
Right. So you were suggesting that because there's such a serious web of largely criminal activity, around the American political system and we'll call it the military industrial complex, that at the moment Trump and his team cannot take direct action. Well, yet at least.
I think they're going to have to be very careful about how they take that action. The deep state has already proven on 9/11, they're pretty vicious. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. It's like one person pointed out in this video I listened to this morning. What's the connection here? The day before 9/11, you got Donald Rumsfeld in a Pentagon press briefing. They can't account for 2.3 trillion. And the next day, the group who was investigating that was eliminated. And it just so happens that Afghanistan cost about 2.3 trillion, and so did Iraq. But as they continued forward with this global war on terror against Libya and also against Syria, we're now up to $7 or $8 trillion blown on nothing. So there's a lot of little touch points here. Dig deeper. I had one guy, this was actually when the FBI.
Karl, sorry, you started to break up there. You need to say that one again. So you'd taken it.
Yeah, I have a friend. He's retired. He's former science and technology, CIA. And when Robert Mueller announced the faces and the names of the 19 alleged pilots, the hijackers, okay? They also released a video showing Mohammed Atta supposedly boarding the flight at Boston Logan Airport. And he sent me an email. He said, don't believe. He sent me just a screenshot of them boarding. He said, don't believe this. He said, this is the Portland, Maine airport. He said, I've been through there 100 times.
Right. And you're telling me this because of this, the background that the story that planes took off from Boston and then hit the World Trade Center cannot be true by the scale of the impact on the side of the building, i.e. it was not big enough.
Now, one of the things Trump was talking about on 9/11 was how they built the World Trade Center. And he was talking about the really big jets. He couldn't believe that they penetrated that much. A 737 is not a big jet. A 767 is. And we have the proof that what hit was a little over 50% of the width of the World Trade Center. A 767 is 75.5% of the width of the World Trade Center wall. So that's many more feet out of 208 feet. That's the width of that wall is 208 feet. So, our approach to it has been, this is a criminal case. What you have to wade through is all the disinformation stuff. And it's a little more refreshing now that people like architect engineers, you're not talking to dummies. And they now know I'm a former architect engineer. I do nanotech now.
Yeah. And we're also talking numbers of them because there's, if I remember the figure, is over 3,000 professionals involved with architects and engineers for architects and engineers for 9/11. So this isn't one or two professionals who are challenging the official narrative. This is thousands of qualified people. This is a very important point, that the organizations that have been standing up to challenge the official narrative, we're not dealing with a few hundred professionals for architects and engineers. I think it's over 3,000.
Yeah, it's
And
over 3,000.
yeah, it would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if amongst the long established 9/11 groups, there was a common approach adopted. Well, to me, it seems to make sense that if we could get all the key organizations agreeing on the basic bullet points of what took place, it would strengthen their hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Captain Dan Hanley's been pointing that out, especially to International Center for 9/11 Justice and Architect Engineers. He's already pointed it out to his group, and they totally agree. He's already teamed up with us. But yes, we would be stronger together than separated. But you have some factions, like on the AE 9/11 Truth. They want to pursue this as a grand jury, which you would have no choice over the judge that you got stuck with. And that could be a fatal mistake because you get in there, you get it all, and then they seal the file and they dismiss you with prejudice. You can't refile the case.
So it is just explain a little bit about the workings of that sort of grand jury. Is this effectively a judicial inquiry or equivalent of a judicial inquiry?
Yeah, it's very similar to some of the inquiries you have there in the UK and also in Canada. Like if somebody dies wrongfully, what happened? In the US, they see the grand jury and nobody's allowed to discuss the case. And they do the investigation. The prosecutor, so to speak, presents the case and they either hand down indictment or they don't, based on what's been put before them. It's a different way of doing what they call jury of your peers, and
Right.
this one you don't even know the process is ongoing. Kurt Weldon and some of the other people, they're pushing for a presidential commission, and Kurt's been careful about saying this: no politicians and no bureaucrats, but even in the corporate sector of the world, you still have this deep state influence.
Well,
Now, one of the interesting things on our approach, due to who is named in this lawsuit, no judge appointed by George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Obama, or Biden could sit on the case because of who is named and why they're named. And that's what I'm trying to get some of these people to wake up to. Just like on the Port Authority, their chronology goes all the way from 1987 up till 2002. The chronology in the Caspian Basin goes from 1992 to 2006. And some of the evidence, like the Donald Canestraro Declaration, he didn't even do those interviews with the FBI and the CIA until 2016 to 2021. And that interview reveals a lot. So all the way through here, a single-minded approach is not going to get there. So what we have done, Captain Dan Hanley and I have done, we've put it on the table in front of them. And some of the 9/11 attorneys hadn't even heard of this. And they requested I send them a copy of this PowerPoint so they could get their head around it.
right. And you've done that. So did you get a response from them?
Not yet. But, when I sent you information initially, it took you a while to get your head around it.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah. I'm laughing, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head there because you really have to read into it, and of course, this is what a lot of I got there, but it did take me a lot of time because you'd sent me your book, which required reading, and then you sent me the PowerPoint presentation, but to actually get my head around all of that information, I had to talk to you again and then go and revisit everything. It's one of the things that I have come to learn in a completely different area, but it's the subject of child abuse. Is that I'll particularly just talk about this because it's been happening in recent weeks, but I've been contacted by journalists in the bigger newspapers in UK. I've suddenly got them coming to me and they're saying, we've come to you because we're trying to work on a case. And the person involved in that case has said, if you want to know how the system works, speak to Brian Gerrish. So I've been very happy to talk to these journalists, but the problem is they know nothing. And when you start to say to them, well, before I can explain, before I can explain uh, why, I've got to explain X to you. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't understand how X works, you can't understand Y.
You're right.
And you you're having you're having a reasonable conversation with these people, but the big thing is they don't want to give the time to actually understand what's happening. And this is absolutely true with legal people. I'm using the example of journalists,
Yeah.
but it's also true with legal people. The more senior they are in the legal system, the more they want the thing delivered to them as all the work done, bullet points, tied up with a ribbon. So virtually they don't have to do any work. If you say to a senior legal person, you actually need to sit down and look at this for 2 days, they're already backpedaling.
Yes.
Maybe I'm being unkind here because there are legal people who've stuck their noses into 9/11 truth, but the wider system, to me, this is the problem. They don't want to do the work to see the evidence.
That's true, and especially if they have to work at it to understand it. Um, Let me share this with the listeners and you. The last Friday, I sent an email to Trump's appointee, who is the new U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. He had a very interesting interview with Tucker Carlson about what their focus was. So I sent him some information. Now, over the weekend, I get an email from Mary Fanning. She is the producer of a radio show that airs 3 hours every Saturday night in the U.S. Huge following, usually over 8 million, sometimes more. But she was requesting a copy of the PowerPoint. And I had to email her back. I said, well, there's multiple PowerPoints. Which one do you want? Or the PDFs. And what she wanted was exactly what I cited to Edward Martin, who's the new attorney general for Washington, D.C. She wanted chapter 5 of my book and chapter 7 of my book. And what's interesting about chapter 5, I'm not only talking about what the anthrax vaccine did to the soldiers. I mean, just it ruins their health, okay? But also exposed who the most likely suspect was. And I've done that to the Department of Justice now. 5 people died 1 week after September 11th because of the anthrax attack on 3 senior Democrat members of Congress, 2 senators and the Speaker of the House. And on down in chapter 7, it deals with the dirty bomb suspect. The FBI blows this out to the whole United States and Canada. Oh my God, we have a dirty bomb suspect. Who they pointed the finger at, and I've never said this on video or radio, but I'm gonna say it here because it's time for the truth to get on this. This was a medical student at McMaster University, Hamilton, Ontario, and who made the phone call from my house was a Canadian woman I was dating for about 3 years after my divorce in 2002. When she called, they never, and exactly where he is, they never called him. They never went to talk to him. They changed their strategy of announcing like a BOLO alert. Oh, the dirty bomb suspect's been seen in Maine. Now, this is something she knew about him. He was living there, attending school under an assumed name. And this is how small these little circles are. The reason he was under an alias is he was one of the people that the CIA was trying to lean on to get him to cooperate with their little cover-up story about radical Islamic males.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
they, yeah,
Carl,
and
stick with this. Stick with this media channel with millions of viewers. You get asked to provide them with information. And did you give this lady the information?
yes, but
And did
chapter 5 and 7 of my book, she's only had it for like 24 hours. So
right,
I figure she won't be calling me till tomorrow or maybe Friday.
right. But are you optimistic that they're likely to do something to broadcast something asking or talking about this subject?
Yes, how they do it is not a podcast; it's a radio show. Okay,
Right,
and the guy that's the host of the Art Midnight, he used to be part of the Coast to Coast AM, which is one of the biggest radio networks in the United States. They even
right,
have listeners in Canada. So
right. So we've discussed the problem of the fact that people always want their information in small bites initially. Maybe I'm also guilty of that in your case. Um, but when you spend the time, you realize that what you're looking at is very, very important stuff. So if this channel broadcasts, this is also going to be a major step forward because this is going to be new information in relation to 9/11 brought to the American public as a whole.
yeah, see one of the problems I see with the media, and that's why I sent you that. I sent you the link to the Barry Zwicker, the Canadian Barry Zwicker. He did a brilliant, The Great Conspiracy, broke down the media breakdowns and just really nailed it as far as what's wrong. We have people in this world that think looking at the little soundbite they just saw on TV makes them informed, and they're not informed. All they're listening to is exactly what the government wants them to hear.
Yeah.
So
This is
the media is found
a little bit broken up again, Carl. We'll
basically
persevere because I
decades.
know you're just on your phone. Let's stick with it, but just to say that now. You did an interview with Tucker Carlson. Is that correct?
No, no, I have not done one with him or Clayton Morris yet. They both know who I am. They know what I'm presenting. Tucker prefers to come to his place and they do it face to face. So that's not possible for me right now. But on Clayton Morris, the way he does it, I'd schedule for him real quick because that would get more to the American audience.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize. A lot of people don't realize Clayton Morris and Tucker Carlson worked at the same time at Fox News. They know each other.
Okay. I didn't. I must admit I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I remember when Redacted first started. It was Abby Martin. She went from RT, and she got fired from RT because she insulted Putin. She claimed that Putin invaded Crimea, and he didn't. And then she went Redacted for a while, and then she's now on something called the Empire Files.
Right. Yeah. So I can't resist asking this, Carl. We did talk about it a little bit, but there are these two big media out, well, three with the radio, but Tucker Carlson and Redacted, obviously very big alternative channels in America. How did you end up coming to the UK column? a UK-based
Because
outlet. How did that work?
I had tried many times to get Tucker Carlson a heads up, but then one day a friend of mine sent me the link to your website about the Joseph Sweeney interview. And he just said, this is a radio show guy from Montana. He's now retired from radio, but he said, Karl, this is right up your alley. Listen to this. And anyway, I listened to the interview that you had with Sweeney, and I have touch points with almost everything he said.
Right.
Just in our investigation of 9/11, for me being from Little Rock, Arkansas, my knowledge of the Clintons.
Yeah. So from that interview, I think we did actually briefly touch on this in one of the two interviews that we did, but it was very brief. So you
Yeah,
listened to that interview and you were hearing more than the average person would have been picking up on what he was saying, because he at one point he talked about an individual who broke the law by going to research documents and then actually destroying some of those documents. That was the key
yeah.
story, I think.
Sandy Berger. Yep. I mean, he stole some very key documents of pre 9/11 intelligence, destroyed them, and he got caught. And basically, for 11 felonies, he got hit with a misdemeanor and no jail time.
Yeah.
I mean, that was ridiculously wide. I mean, what he violated was the Espionage Act,
Yeah.
which usually will get you life in prison.
Yes. Okay. So overall, what have you done? You have thrown another rock into the 9/11 pond, and I'm going to say the ripples have spread, and we are now starting to see some things stirred up as a result of that rock in the pond. How how
That's accurate.
how can we work together? That's a very big we. How can people work together now to make best use of the additional information that you and your team have brought to the surface? How could we get more force out of the 9/11 movement, all of these professional people who've been fighting for many years? How do we get them now redoubling their efforts to make a real impact on particularly it's got to be on the Trump regime, hasn't it?
Well, right now I'm just doing what I know. I put a lot of facts on the table. A lot of people didn't read my book, so they didn't even know about the book. One of the things that I'm doing now is I'm trying to make it, more reachable for other people, like contacting, the nations who lost citizens on 9/11, going straight to them and say, we're that your citizens were murdered. We'd like you to join us in this lawsuit. Small things like that. I'll be trying to communicate with this William Rodriguez later today, maybe tomorrow. He's actually in Europe doing a speaking tour right now, trying to get people to wake up.
Right.
Because a lot of nations in Europe lost citizens. UK, France, Germany, Sweden. So yeah.
Spreading the word is always important. And although I've focused in I've focused in on the Trump administration, of course, all of these other nation states that have been drawn into this morass should be wanting to take the right course and getting the truth out about what's actually happened. So, yes, as he is doing, informing people has got a power of its own.
Yeah, it has some of these nations I'm contacting them. I'm telling them point blank, if for any reason you don't join with us, understand that as a Group B plaintiff, who you lost is Group B plaintiff, and we will stand for them. So maybe when they read what I sent them, they'll understand they have a duty to their own citizens to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they will, but time will tell.
Okay. We are absolutely encouraging people to watch the first two interviews that we did, because I suspect there'll be people who will pick up on this video and they'll watch it and they won't really know what we're talking about because they won't have seen part one and part two. So I would say to the audience now, if you haven't seen either of those two interviews, you need to watch them, because this is the meat of the discussion today. And the other bit I just want to touch on as I think we're sort of coming up to the top of the hour, is
Okay.
people have been very fascinated by you, Karl, because they've some people have said to me, so where's this man come from? He's appeared out of nowhere. He's got a lot of information. He's obviously done a lot of work. You did talk about yourself a little bit in part one, but one of the things that we didn't really cover very much is that you've got a particular interest in nanotechnology, and it would seem logical to me, at least, that this has helped stimulate your interest in 9/11, because you were very quick to come to the conclusion that nanothermite had been used in order to get these immensely hot reactions. Can you tell us, are you able to tell us a bit more about your interest in nanotechnology?
Well, we started this research in 2000. 2003, we had established ourselves as number one. I did a lot of work behind the scenes with DARPA and also what they call Pentagon TISWIG, which is Technical Science Working Group. I practiced architecture for a while, but I always had a feeling that there was something more dynamic, something even stronger, even different approach and steps forward in material science. That's what engineering and architecture is. It's the application of material science, with the design process. So we jumped off into that, and by December 2003, we had established ourselves number one. We're dealing directly with some major issues in America. But we also made a big discovery about why. We can make our nano machines on 50 or 60 hertz, but to do industrial volume, high purity, high strength, we have to be on 50 hertz grid. So that's why I moved to Europe. I didn't move to Europe because I wrote the book about George Bush. So I got invited to the Berlin Air Show to be the keynote speaker, because we're the only company that could produce enough to do what Russia had ordered. They ordered 80 of those huge Antonov jets, and they had an option to order 80 more, and Kiev made and killed all that. It's been a constant clash with the U.S. over here. Even at the air show, they tried to drown me out. They didn't want anybody hearing what I had to say.
Right. So what's what was the connection between the air show and nanotechnology then?
These big jets, they have to have a lot of the carbon nanostructures in the tail sections and the wings, but otherwise the plane will weigh too much. You're having to look for lighter materials that are strong. So yeah, we were the only one that could fulfill that contract. Russia moved it all to back to Russia, including the jet engine plant, but they're not using our nanotechnology level. They're using a weaker one. So over time, they're going to have to reorder the jet sooner. But I had quite a few clashes with the U.S. over here.
Right. But essentially, in this sector, this is the creation of lighter, stronger composite materials that can be used in aircraft construction. And those composites are created by the use of nanotechnology.
Exactly. And for example, once you reach our purity level, In compressive strength, the carbon nanotube is 23 times the strength of steel, and carbon nanofibers are 15 times stronger than Kevlar. And Kevlar will stop a bullet.
Right.
So this is a type of advancement. I had a feeling when I was practicing architecture in the early 80s that there was something like this. I didn't even know what to call it. The word nanotech had not even come up yet. And right now we're working on some things very exciting. People are concerned about, the pollution, and a lot of people are starting to turn their back on these EV cars. I mean, to build one EV battery for a car, you have to excavate about 500,000 tons of earth. And then you have to do the processing, metal refinement, everything. If it's lithium ion, those ponds where they leach it will be dead zones forever. And we've already talked to two major automakers about what we're calling nano EV. The high purity nanostructures, when they're spinning, you'd have an electric generator under your car hood. No fuel input whatsoever, no fire hazard, no toxic issues creating the battery or trying to dispose of the battery. So it's a paradigm leap forward what we're doing right now. I'm working behind the scenes on a $2.5 billion financing package. But it's going to take months to get there.
Right. And
here's what's interesting. That is a AAA rated insured loan. I've already been through 6 months of due diligence with the London experts on insurance. I got approved for $1 billion, and Bush did everything in their power to block me on getting that done. So I went back to them and I said, take a look at nano EV. And they said, how much do you need? I said, it's going to take about $2.5 billion.
Right.
So they said, okay, start talking to banks, tell them term sheet, and all three parties to start talking soon.
Are you able to mention the name of your company?
Yeah, it's Tokata Nanotech Group. Yeah. And I own that group outright, and the patents and everything are protected by my family office structure. But this nano EV thing is going to be the only operation we have where outside people that are stepping in to help me because of what the United States has done to me. They're going to have an interest in that new company. It's privately held.
Right. This is, Karl, this is a very interesting subject in its own right because, I'm happy to say I have long shared concerns about the existing EVs because of one, the way the government has sort of enforced a changeover towards electric vehicles, but also because of the human and environmental damage done in creation of the batteries, which you've touched on there.
Oh, it's colossal. The environmental damage is colossal.
Yeah. And that's largely been swept under the media carpet because we don't see any of the bigger channels really talking about this. But it is a shame that we live in a world now where, because so much new technology gets used for the wrong purposes or is used in a way where we're not actually helping mankind, we're suppressing mankind. There's a tendency for people to be suspicious of all new technology. But it is, sorry, if I just finish this, it is very clear that we do have technologies that, if they were to be used properly, would bring huge benefits to mankind.
Exactly. Early on, when I moved to Europe, we teamed up with a Hungarian company. They got a 250 million euro grant to deal with the Tisa River and the Tisa Aquifer because of a huge problem. And that problem was high levels of arsenic and cyanide in the table water. People trying to take a shower over there, you didn't even want to brush your teeth with the tap water. And we have nanofilters as part of our process that allows us to get to 95 to greater than 99% purity that could trap that. It's called specific trap technology. And you can't do it unless you're at our level. And I mean, the Hungarian government, even the EU, got real excited about it until Bush put his cousin over there and basically knifed that whole project in the back. Not just the Tees River, my company.
Right.
And that's because I wrote the book on it. And I will not retract one word of that book or the 200 articles I've written.
And we just asked the simple question: why would Bush want to do this? Because the technologies that you and presumably other people are working on would undermine his business interests. Is that the motivation?
No, this was just childish crap because I expose him and his family for what they are.
Right.
And understand. Once 9/11 truth is on the table, George Bush is in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And so is Dick Cheney and a whole long line of people. Like I said, I won't retract a word of what I've written or said on the radio because the truth is like a lion. You just let it out there; it'll defend itself.
Yeah. That's I think that brings us to a close, really, Karl. Let's ask the key question. I always like to ask this. So you've got the UK column audience at the moment. What would you like to say to them? What should they be doing? What would you like to see them doing with the information that you have put out?
I would ask them to spread it far and wide. And you'd be amazed how many people in the United States and even Japan and Europe are also watching these 3 videos. They've already seen the first 2.
Right. Well, I'm going to say thank you very much for that. It is very encouraging that UK column does what it does. As a result, somebody has seen us and put you in contact, and now we are managing to do something which hopefully is going to help your work and initiative over the last few years. So that's a very positive point to end on, I think.
That is. And thank you for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Karl.